Hello, everyone. I am so excited. We've got Paula Froehle, the CEO and co-founder of the Chicago Media Project, with us. If you've ever thought about making a documentary film, if you make documentary films, and I get people approaching me all the time who do, so I know you're out there, you don't want to miss this episode. We're talking about funding for social impact and documentary films, so stick around.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
This episode is made possible via the support of our sponsors, including Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd. Paula, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Devin. It's nice to be here.
Well, it's a thrill to have you. What you do is so incredibly important. It's so difficult to make money with documentary films, at least from where I sit, it seems like it. So to find a funding source in that space is just critical. And I know you do more than that, but is it fair to think of the Chicago Media Project as being sort of an angel network for documentary film, social impact filmmaking as a starting place?
I think that's not a bad starting place, yes. In particular because the notion of an angel network means that it's a community of individuals who are passionate about documentary films and have the means to help them get finished. And so, yeah, I would agree. That's a good place to start.
And in addition to investing, you do a number of other things. Tell us a little bit about the other activities that you engage in around this space.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that I'm most proud of about CMP is that from the beginning, we had the idea of creating an ecosystem that would support the many facets of documentary films in the myriad of ways that they need to be supported, whether that's through financial funding, whether that's through networking and connections to organizations that can use the films or help the films get made, access to interview subjects and things like that, but then also to share the work that we love with the public. And so what we think of as our ecosystem is actually three distinct entities. One is CMP, the nonprofit, which provides grant support to filmmakers in early stage funding, mid-career, and innovation and outreach funding. We, as part of the nonprofit, we put on the Doc 10 Film Festival, which is the second entity in the ecosystem, and that, which will be going into its fourth year this year, is meant to expose the public to this art form that we love and at the highest level, and helping people understand what makes documentary films unique within the broader media landscape. And then along with that, on the not-for-profit side, we also do an extended year-round screening series called Dinner and Docs at the Davis, where we do individual films that are brought in, Chicago premieres, we have dinner alongside it, and again, exposing people, not just to the films, but also to the filmmakers. In addition to that, the nonprofit is solely funded by individual members. And so we have programming specifically for the members to help them both learn about the landscape, feel connected to the projects we support, and really just, enjoy and express their love for this art form. And so we take members to different film festivals like Sundance and Hot Docs and Doc NYC, IDFA, we're doing some international festivals this year. And then we also do what really was our signature and starting point for CMP, which is an event we call our Big Table Dinner. And that event, we bring in a film team that has a work in progress. And we have dinner with about 20 to 30 of our members. And it's a very casual and friendly, getting to know you, getting to know projects that need support. And just helping filmmakers understand that our collection of members are more than just funders. They're really like extended family for the projects. And the Big Table Dinners are a great kind of starting point for filmmakers to understand that. So that's the not-for-profit, and that's Doc 10. And then the third entity is CMP Invest Impact, which is our equity fund, affectionately called CMPII. And the equity fund is looking to invest in documentary films that have a commercial appeal. I would say 90 to 95% of them also have a social issue at the core of their storytelling. But they're films specifically that we feel have a place in the marketplace, and that by investing in those projects, we can accelerate the time to finish for the filmmakers so that they're not continuing to kind of be on the grind of looking for more and more grants and having to start and stop production. The equity fund tends to invest larger amounts of money that allow a filmmaker to just sort of finish the film, or, you know, get the story in the can. And then the hope is that through distribution sales, that the money that comes back to CMPII will be reinvested in new projects. So it's another way of creating a replenishing funding source that once again relies on the power of individuals to do that, does not go to foundation or government funding in order to make it happen.
So you're doing all this amazing work. I want to sort of put myself in the shoes of a documentary filmmaker. At what point in the process of developing a film do you want me to call or reach out by email or whatever the contact protocol is? And maybe you should tell us what that is. But
yes.
When in the life of the project do you want to hear from a filmmaker?
Well, you know, honestly, we do hear from filmmakers at many different stages, all the way from ideation through completion. We have a number of ways in which we find out about projects. Those include many of the pitch forums that probably filmmakers are familiar with, whether it's the Hot Docs Forum or IDFA or Sundance Catalyst, or the pitches that Sundance does alongside the festival. We have a network of to other institutions and entities in the field who we reach out to and say, you know, what are some things that perhaps have come across your desk that you may not be able to fund but think are really strong projects. I mean, we're big fans of broadening where the funding goes so that it's not all just piled on the same filmmakers, that there are a number of filmmakers who need support in this field. So the primary ways in which we find out about projects is through industry events. So it's really good when filmmakers can get into, it doesn't have to be the forum at Hot Docs, but there are many different layers that filmmakers can get their projects into the space of the Hot Docs Film Festival so that we can then become familiar with it. We have received submissions directly through the website, and people can do that. It's not, not the most efficient way to do it, because the tracking of those projects, it takes longer to hear back from us. And so it's, you know, I think better to be looking at these other kinds of platforms that will raise the visibility first, and then we can get in touch with them. Our impact grant fund through our not-for-profit currently has just an annual cycle. And so in December, what we do is we take a look at all the projects we've been tracking throughout the year that have come from these different sources. And we winnow down that list to about 30 to 40 that we ask for applications from. And then those 30 to 40 are winnowed down, cut in about half. And then our advisory board takes a look at those projects and makes the final determinations for the grants. And those grants are announced in the late spring and then distributed throughout the following year.
As you think about it, so the grant making side, I presume, happens with films that don't have commercial potential, but that have a social impact that you're excited about. Am I thinking about that right?
I would say typically, more often than not, that's where our grants are being given for. Because we're very much aware that, I mean, not everything is a commercial documentary, nor should it be. But that doesn't mean it's not an amazing story that needs to be told and needs to get out into the world. So yeah, oftentimes our grants go to those kinds of films. We will also sometimes seed fund through granting to help a filmmaker get that initial shoot done or that first cut. for a trailer or a teaser, just to kind of do a little fishing for what kind of story is out there. And that is the hardest money to get, as most filmmakers know. And so that's specifically why some of the Impact Grant Fund is earmarked for early stage funding, so that we can help more projects get some traction that can then go on and get more funding from either us or other entities. And at that point, we might consider it. I don't know that we've necessarily had a project jump from the nonprofit into the equity fund, but it's not, we wouldn't rule it out.
As you're looking at the other side, where you're making investments, equity investments, what identifies to you something that has commercial potential? I imagine every documentary film maker at some point envisions their film screening in 3,000 screens across the country and making some money, if only as a way of measuring audience size and impact. But how do you tell, when you're being objective, the difference between one that has that commercial potential and one that doesn't?
Well, we certainly look for strong character-driven stories that, while much of the work that we support, even on the equity side, has a social cause at the core of its story, what's really true first and foremost is that it's really great storytelling. So, and that always starts with really great characters, intimate access, and a sense of what the inherent drama is in the project, in the story. So we look for that. And then we also, gauge the film in relation to the current climate, whether that's literally the climate or the economic situation or the social environment we're in, or, a film we just recently supported, Knock Down the House, could not have been better timed in terms of its release at Sundance and its potential to really have an influence on who runs and who's elected in 2020. And it's a wonderful story. It's extremely well told. It's a film that, in my former life as an educator, I would have used as an example of a kind of perfectly constructed documentary film. So along with that, it also is hitting at exactly the perfect time. And so there's a bit of that. And I mean, you don't always get that right, but you try really hard to, because if you're going to put equity into a film, it's with the hope and the expectation that the film is going to return some of that equity back. And
yeah.
It isn't we don't see investing in docs as a way to get rich, and nobody should. We see it as a way to create a more engaging experience for our members as investors. And we see it as a way that when that money gets returned, we can turn around and continue to support. So it's good for the overall documentary ecosystem. It's good for everybody if it's done smartly and done right, where both sides of the relationship understand the intent of that equity.
What is the typical grant size? What's the typical investment size? Is there a range, a cap, a floor?
Yeah, our grants tend to run between 10 and 40 to 50,000. And we're just launching a new support vehicle, which is our program related initiatives, which is basically the equivalent of a very low interest bridge loan, which is somewhere between 50 and 100,000 that is loaned to a project at like a 2 to 4% interest rate, with certain markers for paying it back even with zero interest if it's done over a certain window of time. So that's on the nonprofit side. On the equity side, we tend to invest anywhere from about 20,000 to up to $500,000 in a project. And if, again, depending on depending on the story, depending on what the budget looks like, and ultimately what the distribution scenario could look like. Because on the other end, we have a lot of conversations with distributors all the time to stay aware of the kinds of things they're looking for and the range in which they're going to pay to pick up a film.
You're investing along a broader path and say, I'm barely acquainted with Geraldine Dreyfus in Park City here, who invests in these sorts of films, usually at just before distribution stage, I think. You're investing a little early. Have you ever ended up investing in the same project?
Like
Or has she
doing,
ever invested in one of yours?
oh, has she ever invested or vice versa? Yeah,
Yeah.
we've worked with Geraldine a lot. We started the equity fund as a member of Impact Partners, which Geraldine is one of the co-founders of. And they have been wonderful partners and consultants for us in the development of what is now for us a broader investment vehicle where we both invest as an impact partner, but we also invest in our own movies separately from that. Oftentimes, if we're going into a movie at a fairly large investment, it oftentimes is a co-investment with entities like Impact Partners or our partners, Wavelength Productions out of Philadelphia.
It doesn't feel to me, but as I look at the landscape of impact investing, I don't often focus on filmmaking, though it intrigues me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like there are a lot of people doing what you and Geraldine are doing. You mentioned one, Wavelength. Is that what you mentioned?
Yes.
But are there a lot out there I don't know about?
You know, I mean, most often they're individuals who are doing it, you know, based on they have certain issue areas that are important to them, and they'll do it in that way. In terms of a collective community, there isn't really anybody like CMP. On the purely equity investing side, certainly Impact Partners is our role model, and you know, for good reason. They're both successful, but they're also just really wonderful partners, and I think they're great contributors to the documentary space. I think they set a high bar, both in terms of what they invest in, but also who they are as people.
I think Geraldine got her second Academy Award this last year, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, definitely for Icarus, and that was one that we invested significantly in alongside Impact. Yeah, so it was good.
Well, as you look at your portfolio of funding, both on the grant and on the investment side, what are you most proud of having funded?
Well, certainly Icarus is one that we're proud of because it's gotten such high recognition, and it really did deserve it. I mean, Brian is a great storyteller, and all the people that were involved, Mark Monroe and others, they really put together a brilliant story and had the wonderful alchemy of an incredible, you know, event happening in the midst of that film. So it's got its inherent drama. So as far as caliber goes, I mean, that's definitely a film that I'm proud of. I'm also really proud of funding filmmakers like Elaine Sheldon out of West Virginia, who is a filmmaker who lives and works in Huntington and the surrounding area in West Virginia, and she makes films about her community. And so I'm very proud that we support filmmakers that are telling the stories that come out of the worlds in which they live and the people that they're closest to. Damon Davis would be another one with Who Streets, and Saban Folion is the co-director there. Both of them, Damon is from Ferguson, and the film focused on the murder of Mike Brown and became a real, you know, an organizing tool, showing people how citizens can come together and really make an impact on their community. So it's really wonderful, and I'm proud to be able to support filmmakers like that. Separately, I would say that particularly on the equity fund, we're very much interested in looking at documentaries that experiment with the form a little bit, that oftentimes incorporate narrative elements that are beyond just a kind of restaging or, you know, doing inserts that are narratively staged. We're looking for films that are pushing the form a little bit. And recently at Sundance, we premiered a film called The Infiltrators by Alex Rivera and Christina Ibarra, who are a husband and wife team. She is a documentary filmmaker. He's a narrative filmmaker. They came together and made this film called The Infiltrators that has gotten a lot of coverage because it's about a group of dreamers who embed themselves in a detention facility in South Florida, and with the intention of helping people who are in this limbo land of not really being, they're not arrested, but they're detained, helping them understand what their rights are and helping to actually launch free a number of them. And it's a film that tells the story both through the documentary pieces that Christina captured and the narrative, not quite restaging, but perhaps projecting or imagining the narrative piece of what goes on inside the center. And it's a beautiful film that is a hybrid approach that we love, that is also made by folks who are within the community in which they're telling the story.
Interesting. Really a fascinating take. What's the most important lesson you've learned after looking at all these films?
In terms of the most important lesson, I guess I would say looking at it from, I'll do a lesson looking at it from the supporter side, and then the lesson looking at it from the filmmaker side, because I'm also a filmmaker. So I think it helps, my being a filmmaker helps us as an entity better understand the kinds of needs that filmmakers have. So a lesson from the supporter side is that it's really important to give the filmmakers the space to explore and tell the story they need to tell, and to allow that story to unfold in the time that it takes. And I think that we do a good job of that. We don't put onerous reporting responsibilities on our funded filmmakers. We look to do innovative ways of them reporting back to us. They can do cell phone videos that just give us updates, snapshots from the field, things like that, so that we don't interrupt that process too much. I think that's probably the most important lesson, is that your support should come in a way that it doesn't interrupt the creative process. And then on the filmmaker side, I would say the biggest lesson is for them to understand communication. That taking a moment to send a quick email or to send a cell phone video or snapshot or brief little updates, check-ins with the people who have supported them goes a long way toward keeping those folks feeling connected, that you're appreciative of the support that they provided. And when you get further down the road and perhaps you hit a snag in production and you need extra funding, or you have an emergency situation and you're needing contact with someone you don't have direct contact to, if you have kept your funder and your supporter updated on your progress, it's much easier. Things happen much more quickly because it's felt more to be a relationship rather than just a knocking on the door every time something is needed. So communication, which seems so simple and yet is sometimes rare from the filmmaker side, it's one thing, like I say it to them all the time. You cannot communicate too much with your supporters.
Great lesson. Paula, how did you get into this work and why?
Well, I've been a filmmaker for most of my life. And so it's been a pursuit and understanding the need for support from that end. I was an educator as well, and so I helped to nurture a lot of young filmmakers over the years, and I love doing that. I love helping stories find their way and helping filmmakers find the ways in which to tell those stories. CMP was started after I was involved with a team that brought The Good Pitch to Chicago. And we raised almost $400,000 in the room in one day for 7 documentaries. And I incidentally said to Steve Cohen, my co-founder, you know, if I could do this year round, I would leave the school that I had started and had been running for 7 years, that I would leave that to continue to do this kind of work, because it was so meaningful and had demonstrated how clearly there was a need for people to support work, to get involved in that way. So I just said, yeah, if I could do this year round, I would leave what I was doing. And little did I know that he turned and looked at me and said, well, actually, I've been thinking the same thing, and I'm going to close up my law practice and just focus on investing and supporting documentaries. So why don't we try this together? And that was the birth of CMP.
Fantastic. Paula, I am so grateful that you would take the time. I know you're out of time. Before you go, would you just take 1 minute maybe and tell people how they can learn more about Chicago Media Project and how they can connect with you personally?
Sure. So everything is really done through our website. We are chicagomediaproject.org. You can get more information on who we are if you happen to be an individual who would like to be part of a community of funders and kind of have that experience as part of CMP. There's a membership page on the website. If you're a filmmaker, there's an information page, so you can be submitting through the website that way. And other than that, we post all the time on our Instagram page, which is at Shy Media Project. And we post on our Facebook page. So all of the films we support and the things that they're doing and things we find important, it all comes through there.
Fantastic. Well, Paula, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We wish you every success in continuing to help filmmakers share those impactful films.
Thanks, Devin. It was a pleasure.
All right, let's do some good.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thank you for listening. Devin Thorpe's mission is to end extreme poverty, improve global health, and mitigate climate change before 2045 by finding and sharing the stories of those who are doing the most good. You can join with other listeners to accelerate Devin's mission by visiting helpdevin.org right now.